Good day, everyone, and a warm welcome to Myontec's football podcast. My name is Laurent, and I'll be your host today. We're going to talk about football, and we're going to be together for about 1 hour. I'm extremely happy to introduce our very special guest, who's already known in the pro football circles and also in the sports science circles. He has worked with the Italian Football Federation, as well as football clubs such as Napoli and Everton FC. And he's currently working with the ILES Academy in Hungary. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Luca Guerra. Luca, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm really happy and glad to be here with you today. And I hope we can have a good discussion.
Let's have a good discussion. Maybe as a starting point for our listeners who don't know about you, could you briefly introduce yourself and talk about your experience?
Yeah. So basically, I'm a sports science and strength conditioning. In Italy, there is not so much different like in England or in other countries in Europe. We study sport, science of sport, and then we have a master's degree, and then we decided which is our special field. I work in Hungary in the past, in Budapest Honvéd, in a professional club. I'm still involved in Hungary because basically my girlfriend, she's Hungarian, so that's why I have.
You have a connection.
Yes, I have a lot of connection here in Hungary. I work nearly 4 years with Carlo Ancelotti, before in Napoli and then in Everton in Premier League until this summer when Carlo went to Real Madrid. And of course, my entire life was in football, but I love every kind of sport. And my main activity basically is using the technology for evaluate the player, evaluate what the player do in the pitch and outside of the pitch, but like also work individually with the player in the gym, also outside. And yeah, I know your company because your product is very, very interesting. And I think that the wearable technology is the future for the evaluation in football and in sport in general.
Absolutely, and obviously we believe in that, and we believe that the future of muscle analysis is already here, and that's why we keep developing our products in that way. Now, so it seems you've had a very interesting career so far, working and cooperating with these different clubs. Now, let us talk about football in general. What would be your top priorities when you're working with a pro football club or with a pro team? How do you see that?
So for me, the most important things when you work in a professional football club, and of course you have the facility for do that, is work individually with the players, because a lot of time as strength conditioning, as sports science, we have to focus on the team. So we basically work in an average, we don't have sometimes the possibility to work individually and to develop the players and build the players. But for me, this is the most important things. I mean, as a performance, the most important things, also the most interesting things is work individual with the player, try to understand the ability of every player, the skills of every player. I speak as in a physical way, and then start to make protocol, start to make individual work with them. And this kind of work that you can do it in the gym, you can do outside in the pitch, doesn't matter. But the target must be develop the player, develop his physical capacity, develop his physical skill. And lot of time, if we work just with a team, that is nearly impossible. So that's why for me it's important that also 20, 30 minutes before the training start, before the team training start, we can take the player, work individually with him, and create a program for him, create protocols for him. And also is important speak with the player and let him understand why we do that, which is the target. Maybe you need time, but for my experience, when when an athlete understands why you do that, he will also recognize the positive things. He will recognize that after a while, he's getting better. So it will be automatic, and then more or less all the team will have his protocols, his individual program, and then is how I like work, because now we have so much possibility with the technology that we know nearly everything about let's say the external load. The challenge is try to understand which is the individual and the internal load, and with your with your technology you develop with the electromyography system is really interesting, and all the time I find new information about the player that I have in front, because sometimes we think that I just say to you a simple example. If you do a simple step up, you all the time think, okay, do the step up for the right leg, he will use the right quadriceps and so on. Yeah, maybe then you analyze a simple step up with a short, and you understand that all the time maybe that player use the left quadriceps because he push with the other leg. He doesn't push with the leg that is on the step. And this is the really simple example. But believe me that at every level, I found a lot of this, as I say, mistake. And when you know the things, when you have the information about the exercise, about the reality, then you can start to change. You can start to work with the player, and you can start to grow up, to grow the level of your work. And that for me is very important.
That's one of that's a good point, because that's one of the reasons why when we designed our product, we wanted to take the electromyography out of the lab and into the field.
Yeah.
So you obviously need to have clothes or wearables that are comfortable, that are wireless. You don't want to be running around the football field, in a training situation with wires. So the idea is to collect this data in the real environment, and I guess that's what then helps you to do your work.
Absolutely.
There's another thing you said which was interesting. So if I'm understanding correctly, there usually is a team strategy when it comes to strength and fitness.
Yeah.
Combine that with the individual, so you always break it down to the individual level, and so you have both dimensions.
Yes, that is the most important thing, because when you work at the top level, you have to care about the player, you have to care about your athlete, and it's not enough work, for example, do a work all together with the team in the gym or together outside. You have to work individually, because there are so many differences and so many different kind of player in one team, different kind of performance. If you have time, if you have the possibility and the space for do that, is a must. You have to work individually. because if no, you will just remain on surface. You will never go deep inside in the performance model, and you will never be able to understand the athlete that you have in front. And just if you completely understand the athlete and the player that you have in front, you can work with him and you can help him and develop him.
Yeah, that's another good point. And actually, I had a question about that. So obviously, you can use whatever technology is available to discover the profile of the athlete or the player.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess you also have to take into account, and this is my question, every player will come to you with some past injuries, for example.
Yeah.
So how do you account for that? Is this just a case of you looking at a medical file and knowing that this player had an ankle problem or a knee problem? How do you look at that?
Allora, for me, the most when you have an injury player, of course, you have to collaborate with the medical department, and collaboration is really important when there is the injury, because from my side, I can do some things, but I will never be able to understand completely the kind of injury. And that's why I need the help of the physiotherapy, and that's why I need the help of the doctor. When this kind of figure, these three figures work together, then there is really the possibility to understand the injury, try to find a solution for the injury, but also try to investigate about the injury. So the main point, the main question is why that player had the injury and how we can help him for the future. That's why for me is really important have a protocol with some tests and create a database with tests and with all the history of the player, with the data of the player, because in case there is an injury, we have some main point. We have some, let's say, like stick that we can analyze and we can understand. For example, here in Hungary, this academia where I work now at the moment, this is a government project. There are 10 elite academy in all the state, and we have incredible facility, incredible, let's say, tools. For example, for every player from under 15 to under 19, we use a lot of different protocol, a lot of different tests. We use the UMAC, we use the NORBOR, we use the groin bar. Now we are using the shorts, and we are creating a database. And if a player have an injury, and of course, if we see there are some particular disbalance, for example, we can immediately start to work with him individually, and we can immediately start to give him help. For example, I finished 20 minutes ago, we do with the under 17, we do the NORBOR, then we do the UMAC, and there was player that is very easy and immediately understand that there was a disbalance on the hamstring. And that was obviously also a child could see the difference between the right and the left hamstring. And you know, sometimes I ask to the player, you have the problem there on the right hamstring. All the time I have the same answer. Yes, I had it. And that's why in that kind of situation, we need to work on it. We need to help him, because that players, of course, in the future, if we don't do nothing, he will have problem at the hamstring. That's why, you know, in our field, in our work, there is all the time this, let's say, big conflict between the strength conditioner. They say the injury are unpredictable, or the injury are predictable, we can do prevention, you need to do prevention or not. But I think in a really simple way. I mean, there are, and I saw in my career, really lot of case where you don't. It's very easy predict the injury, because when you see a huge disbalance between the hamstring, or between the hamstring and the quadriceps, or you see, for example, that a player doesn't use the glute and so on. It is simple. More, you will be sure that in I don't know, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, maybe he will have a muscle injury. And if we don't do nothing, if we don't work on it, we will be sure that he will have an injury. But if we believe in that he will have an injury because there are a lot of disbalance, that there is also his biomechanics is not right, if we don't do nothing, of course, the player will have injury and he will have problem.
So it's fairly predictable.
Lot of time is clearly predictable. Lot of time.
What would you say is the most common injury in pro football today? Is it the hamstring?
Absolutely the hamstring. Absolutely the hamstring. Especially in a top level, where of course they need to use the hamstring a lot because the sprint distance is very high, and the activation of the hamstring during a sprint over 20 km/h is incredible, and there is no other exercise in the gym that they can arrive at that kind of activation. So in the top level, when the player have to sprint all the match, and I saw player that arrive at 700 meters over 25 km/h in a match, then the risk of an injury at the hamstring is really high, especially if that player have some biomechanic problem, have some disbalance that in some case are not predictable, but in a lot of cases, trust me from my experience, is completely predictable. But the problem is how we work on it. And the problem is also if we are able to investigate it. That's why are important technology like yours, like your product, because a lot of time when you vest a player with the shorts and you simply let the player run, couple of minutes is clear if the player have a big problem. It's completely clear. I mean, there is no way that you can mistake. No way.
Yeah, that's another good point, and that's definitely a very important aspect is the balance. So the way we want to visualize the balance, in a way that it's quite obvious if you see something that should not be there, that you can then, based on what you said, a cooperation with the medical team, or if there's no history of previous injuries, maybe looking at the technique, running technique, etc. So it's very important, the balance, as you explained. Have you noticed any differences in injuries based on the position of the player? So in other words, I would assume there's a big difference whether you're a goalie, if you're playing a goalkeeper or a forward. But I would imagine there's a difference if you're a midfielder, you probably run a little more. If you're a defender, you're using different muscle. Different behavior.
About biomechanic, we can stay here 2 days about speaking about it, because it's really interesting. It's a very interesting topic, and also a very large topic. But I can tell you this. I can bring you an example of a player that we had in Everton last year, and he had lot of problem all the time in his career at the I don't remember the word in English, is gastrocnemia.
Yeah.
And the question was, okay, why this player have all the time in his career problem in the gastrocnemia? So what we did is we use a camera, a simple and cheap camera. We use a video analyst program. We use, of course, the camera not at 30 frames per second, but we use a camera at 90 frames per second, because it's really important to check the movement of the player frame by frame. And then we discover things that was really, really easy and stupid to discover, because that player basically never use his glute, never use basically his hamstring, but all his run was based on the gastrocnemius, all this run, because it totally collapsed with the glute. It didn't have stiffness, zero stiffness. And so the question and what we understand is normal that a player like that, if he run 10 kilometers in a match and use for 10 kilometers the gastrocnemius, is of course after, maybe not after one match, but in 2-3 matches, the percent of possibility that he will have a problem on the gastrocnemius is very, very high. So what we did for him, the program was, okay, we need to start to work with the player in stiffness. We have to start to work with the player individually and try to develop his possibility to activate the glute, the hamstring, also the quadriceps, and so on, because all the run of him was based on just the gastrocnemius. So was incredible, was absolutely incredible, unbelievable, but was extremely simple, the solution in that case.
Yeah, to help. Yeah,
extremely simple. And yeah, probably if someone see it before, or someone try to investigate the problem before, maybe that player had a different career.
Yeah, obviously.
But with 4 or 5 injury every year, of course, your career change. Your career can also stop.
Yeah,
but yes, for do that, of course, you must have the technology for do that. But you, first of all, you must understand that when there is an injury, one of the most important things is ask yourself why the player had the injury. Because, you know, if there is a contact with another player or something like that, of course, is
you need to understand. You need to understand what
but
the
if there is
is
no contact and is in a situation where there is nothing unpredictable in the pitch, and in the history of the player, there is all the time this problem that become like a chronic problem, then we have to start to investigate, and we have to start to understand, okay, but why this player had this problem all the time? That's why it's important to use the technology in football, not because as I listen sometimes, you know, we want to bring science in football because we think that football is a science, is mathematics, and so on. No, I don't agree. I don't agree in that. Football, Bangsbo, that is a very important methodology in football from Denmark. He saw one time he said this: football is not a science, but science can help football. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. I completely believe in that. I completely believe in that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I guess that if football would be a science, there will be a few recipes on how you can win a Champions League or how you can win a national championship.
Everyone will do the same training, no? Everyone will do the
Right,
same
right.
things, and everybody will win everything, but
Right.
not so simple, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we're dealing with people, so everybody's going to be different, as you mentioned. Every athlete, every player has a different profile, and that's where science can help. You can establish somebody's profile, and we just talked about injuries. So you may be dealing with a player, an athlete that has had a lot of injuries in the past, and you're trying to understand why. And this brings another question to my mind. If let's say that you've got a player that has not had any injuries, that he or she's been lucky not to be injury free. Is there anything that you personally, on the prevention side? So
for me, about the prevention, it's very important for me the mobility of the hip, because through the hip pass a lot of muscle, lot of let's say important part of the mechanic of the football player. So when I see a player that have a good hip mobility, this usually means that player is healthy. All the time I see player with a reduced hip mobility. Usually that player also a reduced ankle mobility. Not all the time, but most of the time, that player have all the time some problem, muscle problem, ankle problem, maybe it's pubalgic. So first of all, if we talk about prevention, one of the most important things is the hip mobility. Immobility, ankle mobility, and of course a good activation of the core. And as a core, I don't mean just the abdominal, but I mean activate the core when is necessary. Activate the core when is necessary, and breathe in a right way. Breathe in a right way when you do the exercise. Breathe in a right way when you play football, and so on. So it's really it's not easy explain to you with word how I manage or how we manage in the past the prevention, but is a very complex things, because the football player is a complex system, but you all the time have to watch the athlete and the player in a global way. So you have to watch him when he do the exercise inside in the gym. You have to watch him during the performance. You have to watch him when he run. You have to watch him when he change the direction. So just if you have in your mind, and of course the data helps in that, a clear performance model of that player, then strategic, you can start to understand the player that you have in front, and then start to elaborate and create a protocol of prevention for him.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding this correctly, so preventing injuries is actually one of the most, or is it the most complex topic?
Absolutely.
That we can look at, and since today we're talking about football, you explained that it's very complex because first of all every player is different.
Yes.
They may have a different history. So we talked about players who had a lot of injuries in the past.
Yeah, different age, different history,
different age, different career,
different career, different role. Yes.
Yeah, and this brings me to, obviously you have the experience of different leagues.
Yeah.
And you know, as a football fan, we always, you know, caricature different leagues. So the Premier League is supposed to be the most physical, and then the Latin football, the Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, French is more technical. From a more scientific point of view, have you noticed some remarkable differences between different leagues?
So this is a really another interesting question and another, let's say, hot topic. From my experience, the difference between a league like Premier League and a league like Serie A, the Italian Serie A, is that are different league, different championship, but because there are different tradition, different culture, different style of football, and in different culture, different style of football, and so on, I put also different referee, different style, because for example in Premier League, the referee all the time try to let the match go, so there are much less interaction compared to Italy, because the referee whistle less. There are less foul than in Italy usually. So the usually the game, the effective playing time of the game is longer compared to the Italian league. That's why if you analyze a match, most of the time you will see more acceleration, more deceleration, more sprint, and so on in the Premier League. But also because the effective playing time in the Premier League is longer than other championship. Or for example, when I was playing the Champions League, for example, when we played with Napoli the Champions League 2 times, our performance model in Champions League was completely different than our performance model in the Championship. But because in the Champions League, clearly there was other kind of referee and other kind of match. Because in Champions League, the match, they were open. So you never found in Champions League, or rarely you find teams that they cover, that they want to defend, that maybe defend with 5-6 players in a line, and so on. While in Serie A, a lot of time, if you are a top club, you play against a small club in first division, and the small club in Italy typically defend. So every player is behind the ball, there are no space. That's why the data drop down. So I think is a false myth about that the Premier League is of course there are more duels, there are more physical contact in the Premier League, but also because the referee let it do it. If there is a physical contact or a physical duels in Italy, lot of time the referee whistle and there is the foul. And now, of course, in this historic moment, the Premier League is the richest championship in the world. So they have the best player. That's why it's also the most performing championship, because, of course,
most competitive.
Most competitive, best player means also have the best performance usually. And it's not this is not a myth. I mean, just when you analyze a team like Liverpool, for example, the data of Liverpool, the physical data of Liverpool are absolutely incredible. And also they select the player because they have a particular style of football. They have a particular style of model of football. Klopp wanna all the time play transition, And you need players basically that they run a lot, they are very intensive and so on. If you want a team, for example, like Manchester City, that keep the ball possession, dominate the match and so on, trust me, the data of Manchester City are not so impressive, but are not impressive because they have a different style of football.
The style of play, yeah.
Yeah, different style of play. Guardiola asks completely different things. And when you dominate the game and when you have all the time the ball possession, of course, your performance data go down usually. But this doesn't mean that you don't win the match. Probably you win the match, but you can win the match, let's say, in a really different way.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's no actually right or wrong. It's just a different style of play.
Absolutely. You can like more one or the other one, but
as a fan,
as a fan, but there are no difference. I mean, there are just different style, different model of football. And the coach choose that in base of his idea of football, but there is not a right way or
wrong way.
Or a wrong way.
Yeah, and this leads me to another question, which we know that a modern football player, we're talking about the professional level, obviously, modern player should be able to do many different things on the field, as far as, acceleration, deceleration, changing direction, jumping, if you're going to do a header. Can you talk about the relationship between the glutes, the hamstrings, the quadriceps in that modern pro footballer?
So based on my experience, the main problem in the football player usually at the moment is that a lot of football players at all the level, they don't use the glute. They don't use enough the glute. To be honest, I don't know why. I have some idea, but it's not clear for me.
It's hard to pinpoint why.
It's really hard to understand why. But based on my data and based on my experience, the level of activation of the glute is never enough. And glute is a muscle that we call, I don't know if it's right in English, but it's synergic, synergic at the hamstring. So hamstring and glute, they should work together. They should activate together and should give, let's say, energy in the movement. But a lot of the time, the mechanic of the player, the biomechanic of the movement of the player is based on the hamstring and not on the glute. So for me, it's very important.
Sorry to interrupt. What can you do once you've discovered that in the player? Are there a number of things that you can do, or is it very difficult to improve, or can you actually?
I think it's difficult, but for example, a lot of time I use the shorts in the gym, and I try all the time to isolate the glute, and I all the time try to say at the player to think about in an exercise, okay, focus on your glute. So try to be concentrated when you're doing this exercise, and don't use just the hamstring, but focus also on your glute. And all the time when I say this in a really simple way, the activation of the glute increases a lot. Of course, it's also important for me put some exercise for the glute in every individual program that we create for the football player, because there is this tendency that we use all the time, or we put inside in the individual program exercise for the quadriceps, exercise for the hamstring, and sometimes we forget exercise for the glute. But from my experience, that are really, really important. And also, I believe that you have to work with the quadricep, you have to work with the hamstring, but everything must be supported by the glute. And because it's a really important muscle, really big muscles, and the player must be able to manage it, because it's also, there are a lot of connection between the core and the glute. And yeah, if you ask me which is the most important muscle in football, probably I pick the glute, because
that's interesting.
Yes, it's interesting. I know it's not common, but from my experience, if you work well with the glute, you can reach a really good level of activation in the other muscles. You can prevent a lot of injury, and you can develop a lot the player in that. While, for example, when you work with the quadriceps, sometimes you work, you spend a lot of time, but the player use usually well the quadriceps. They use it every day in the performance, in the pitch, in the gym, and so on. And so maybe you work, you spend a lot of time, but you increase, I don't know, the performance of the glute for just 3-4%. But when you work with the glute, in couple of weeks, I saw really lot of increase of
Big difference.
Big difference. Huge difference. Massive difference.
So you would,
in a short time.
Yeah.
Short time.
So you would let's say you would work on some sort of strengthening program,
Yes.
but also, is there any technique involved? Are you also working on?
Absolutely. The coordination during the exercise, the coordination is really important. First of all, I like to say, first you have to learn the coordination of the exercise, and then you can push. Just at the moment, you can push and you can put the strength in the exercise. If you don't know the coordination of the exercise, is without sense to do the exercise, because most of the time you create this balance, you create more problem than good things. So
you first have to do it correctly.
Yes.
And then
you can push, and then you can transfer the strength in the exercise. Another big topic, for example, is the transfer. There is a transfer between the exercise that we do in the gym and the pitch.
Right.
This is another big question.
Another
big, huge topic. And as I say for other topic, I'm not so sure about it. I'm not so sure. And I'm still try to learn and still like to try to investigate it.
Yeah, these are big topics. And as you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, like trying to get the big picture is key. And I guess we're all trying to do that. And when we design our products, we also always try to keep in mind that this is just a help.
Yes.
For the sports scientist or the strength and conditioning coach or the player, or whoever is using the technology. It's just a help. It gives you a glimpse of, let's say, your balance, or the ratio between the glutes and the hamstring, for example. And often you discover things, so often you're surprised. You think, okay, I didn't realize this was going on. But when you take all of this into perspective, like you talked about technique, you talked about style of play, all of these are just other items that we keep
Yeah,
adding.
section
And,
of a big picture. Section
that's
of a
why
big
it's
picture,
complex.
big and complex picture. Definitely.
That's why it's complex.
Definitely
And when we talked a few weeks ago with your colleague Mauro Testa,
yeah.
he told us that it's very important to have somebody who tries to collect all the data. Like you talked about, you may be talking to the team doctor, you may be talking to the head coach, you may be talking to the physio.
Yeah.
It's important to have somebody who tries to get the whole picture.
The whole picture. Yeah. Absolutely. Mauro, Professor Testa is one of, I think, I'm not shy to say, is one of the best in the world in this. Try to understand the whole picture.
Yeah.
And it's definitely important that there is someone, a biomechanic like him, that is able to collect the data from every department, let's say, and try to figure it out, a clear picture of the player. Because just with a clear picture, you understand who you have in front.
Yeah, and he was saying, and I think you're saying exactly the same. That's the same message.
Yeah.
What he was saying is that the ultimate goal is that all of this is adding value to the club.
Yeah.
I agree. If you're doing injury prevention, or if you're helping somebody return to play after an injury, or if you're increasing the performance, at the end of the day, what are you doing? You're increasing value to the club.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Because the player are value. The player are value for the club. The club invest a lot of money, a lot of time for the player. And you have to invest. Usually, we invest our money in a right way.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's what we should do with the player.
Yeah.
The club invests a lot of money in them, a lot of knowledge, a lot of time. We must be able to increase the investment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Luca, could you give us some example? Maybe, I know it's not easy to do it just like that in a podcast, but like almost taking like a step-by-step approach. What is your process, the most common process when you're using Myontec's technology in your work? Just a basic example that everybody could understand.
So when I use the shorts, the Myontec shorts, usually, first of all, we was using in the past and I using now, all the time use the shorts when we make kind of jumping test, like counter moving jump, squat jump, drop jump, and so on. So I use the platform, the force platform plus the shorts, and I create with a video analysis system. I connect all the data together, and I create simple a video with the data of the platform and the data of the short together, and that gives me a really clear picture and really clear feedback about the performance of the player during the jump, for example. Plus a lot of time when we do, let's say, analytic exercise to some player in the gym, I like to give to them the shorts, and also in that situation we use the camera, we record the exercise with the camera, and then I link the data of the shorts, and I create a video with the exercise and connect it with the data of the shorts, and give to me a clear idea about what happened in that moment at that player. So because like so, the next time you can correct the exercise, you can correct the player, you can choose another exercise if you need another target, and so on. Plus, when we do biomechanical analysis, for example, during a sprint of 30 meters. Of course, we use the gate. We use also here video analysis system, but usually I use also the shorts for see if the activation of the muscles is right, is not right, have some problem, and so on. For example, there were some times where the activation of the muscle was a completely mess. I mean, really a disaster. But in the history of the player, there wasn't a history of injury and so on. But that's because the player, in some way, and this is the, let's say, the enigma, the mystery of our body, find a right compensation, and the player was an healthy player, but maybe he could use more the right quadriceps and the left quadriceps. He didn't use the left hamstring and so on. But all the time, the body, in that case, was create a compensation, and he was a healthy player and without injury, without big problem. But that's why I say again, it's really important to have a complete pictures, because if you don't have a complete pictures, the risk of mistake is really huge.
Absolutely. It really, I think we've said it 3 or 4 times during this session that every athlete or every player is different. And now you're describing a particular player that didn't have any injuries. The performance level was quite high, but when you're looking at the activation, you're thinking, oh, it's all over the place.
Yeah, but it was unbelievable.
You know, so
but
that's
if I have to say, I would like to say an advice at the person, at the people that they are listening us. When you use a technology like the technology that you design, is really important. Record with the video the situation, because when you use this kind of technology plus a video technology, you will see that in front of you a new world will appear. Will appear really a new world, and you will see the performance, you will see the exercise in a really different way, and that changed my way to see the movement, to see the exercise, to see the performance, because without let's say a technology like the Myontec technology, and without a video technology, you will never be able to understand completely what means performance.
Absolutely, and I think that's where science can really help the professionals, as we said before. So the products that we develop, we always try to keep that in mind, that we're only trying to provide a help for the professional in the field to discover these things, which are not easy. You need to get the big picture. It's complex. There's so many different items, so many different things happening, and not to mention that everybody is different, as we talked about. So and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help the professionals and also the individuals. In some cases, we have hobby sports people who use our shorts
sure.
for their own development. You know, we've had people buying the shorts, and their idea is to start doing Ironman triathlons.
Sure.
And they start from the very basic level, and they want to keep track of what they're doing in their training. So that's what we try to do. I think we're almost at the end of our session. So I want to thank you again for your contribution. This was an incredible session. You have so much knowledge that I think
maybe next time, I would like, of course, if you are interested in this, also use some video, because it's much more simple explain with some video and with some, let's say, example. Because I'm not sure I was completely clear, but yeah, my message, my take-home message is really don't be afraid about the technology. The technology is here for help us. It's just a help. Doesn't take nothing from our work, from our knowledge. It just give us material for work, give us oxygen for work. So that's why it is really important. Use the technology and use it well.
Very good. Well, I think those are perfect words for conclusion of this session. So, Luca, a million thanks once again for visiting us. And I appreciate the offer that you just made, that we could do another session with a video. So,
of course,
definitely we'll be happy to do that. Okay. I also want to thank all our partners, customers, and all the listeners to this podcast. Do not hesitate to contact us, and wish you all a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.